Your garden has such lush vegetation, Hilda. No wonder, even in your stories, all kinds of natural spirits appear. Even in your magnum opus Luna Aswang romance, they're all over, including your paintings. Why do you know so much about such things?
Ewan ko nga. Kasi my father prohibited all our maids from telling anything about them to me. Bawal ng aswang sa bahay namin kasi he was a scientific man. Ayaw niya yung anak niya na matakutin.
Okay.
So, yan. Wala namang akong alam. Pero isang araw, ang aking mga kaibigan ay puro anak ng driver. Pagkatapos, sabi nila, ay nako, meron nakita doon aswang sa may bakuran namin. Kalahati lang, nandoon sa gitna ng garden. Pagkatapos, sabi niya ganon, ang ginawa nila, gusto nilang hulihin yung aswang. Kaya kumuha sila ng isang, kung tawagin nila, umang. But I think it's one of these big, trichidia or whatever you call it, the big clams, and put it on the stomach, and it was open like that. And so when the aswang came back, ganyan, nakabalik na ron. Tapos, aray, sabi nung aswang, kasi yung, clam, sumara, ayaw nang magbukas. Hindi na siya pinakawalan hanggang namatay. Siyempre, ang takot ko. Meron kayang ganon. Hindi ako naniniwala na meron kasi sabi ng daddy ko, wala. Ayun, pero hindi ko nakalimutan ang aswang mula noon.
And then, how did you eventually research about it? How did you manage to combine that real knowledge with information from?
Kasi mahilig akong pumuntang nagkahalukay sa mga basura. Nung araw ang gulo-gulo ng ng anthropology department ng Ateneo. Wala naman library kagaya ngayon eh. Tapos, yung sa ilalim ng isang shelf na ganyan, katakot-takot na papel, yung pala, mga papel all about the aswang.
And this was by Father Frank Lynch, correct?
Oo. Si Frank Lynch nagtuturo ng anthropology nung, ano ba yun, 1970s?
No, he was a high school teacher, I think, in the province, sa Camarines Norte in the 70s.
Yun.
And then taught in anthropology department. And that's how you eventually got your research going.
Yes, and I found them all. So I found quite a bit of things there.
And I remember you were telling me how surprised you were that it turns out that the Bicol Aswang, right, which was his expertise, was apparently very much an important part of folklore.
Yeah, and not only that, yung sabi nung study ay iba-iba raw ang klase ng aswang. Meron daw aswang na dito nahahati, merong aswang na leeg lang, pagkatapos lumilipad ang ulo, parang corkscrew. Meron namang aswang hanggang tuhod lang ang putol niya. Sabi ko, bakit ba hanggang tuhod lang po ito, nagtiyaga pa, iniwan. Kasi daw, kailangan ng humuhon, para pagbalik nila, alam nila kung saan sila babalik. Ayun. Pagkatapos, sabi nila, merong flying aswang, merong walking aswang, ganon. Pagkatapos, eto pa pala ang tinuro nila sa akin. Nung araw daw, gagawa ng, yung mabahong magic ointment. Yung magic ointment na yon, kukunin mo sa langis ng nyog, natatatlo, iisa yung butas na ganon, iisa yung mata. Oo, pagkatapos, kukudkurin mo yun, pero kailangan madilim, mabagyo, nakakatakot, ganyan. Tsaka, yun yung gagawin mong oil. Tapos, alagyan mo ng tae ng manok. At saka, lahat ng mababahong herbs at magics to. Para paumbaho, basta yun ang gagamitin. Pagkatapos, ganito rin ang gagawin mo. Ito, ang maliit mong daliri. Kukunin mo yung lalagay mo dyan, hanggang sa maliit na to. Hindi ko maabot sorry. Tapos, yun namang kanan. Dito rin, ganyan. Hanggang doon sa baba. Hanggang magkanyan. Tapos sasabihin mo raw, kas. hanggang yung cast na yon hindi na nanggagaling sa bibig mo, kung hindi galing na sa pakpak ng aswang, hanggang lumipad, nasa doon, sa taas. Yun.
Ganun nagiging aswang. Tapos
Yun ang paglipad nila. At ang kanilang launching pad,
ay,
batalan.
tapos yun yung ginawa mong libro. Right? Na ang
Oo.
ay Luna Aswang Inquiry.
The Aswang Inquiry. Oo, pagkatapos yun din yung naging, ano yun, Luna and Aswang Romance, yung,
Eventually, a production.
production na, yun yung
And
aming,
Colin, you're also the one who illustrated this particular book, correct?
yes.
How did you get hooked on Filipiniana? Were your parents nationalistic?
No, it was my grandfather who was. Alam mo, revolutionaryo yung aking lolo. Pero my father was born at the turn of the century, right after the revolution. Like his parents, he hated the Spaniards. He found the new colonizers modern, liberal, and friendly. The Americans made him a pensionado. Alam mo ba ibig sabihin ng pensionado? O siya. Ikwento ko na rin yung
yes.
yung revolution, yung pensionado scholarship. Siya pinadala sa Oxford, England, in order to do his postgraduate in medicine. Okay, and he just loved the Americans like all people then. Mga amboy sila lahat.
So it wasn't your parents who made you love Filipiniana?
Hindi. Yun na namang mga kaibigan kong anak ng driver. Kasi isang araw, sa bahay ako nila, pagkatapos, pinakita nila sa akin ang kanilang readers. Ang readers ko, kasi Catholic school. Ayan, ang dami-daming snow, at saka merong acorns, at may squirrels, naglalaro sa snow, may snowman, may kung ano-ano. At saka ang pangalan ng kalye nila, Elm Street. Tapos pinakita nila sa akin itong Philippine Readers. Ay, sus, nakita ko, may dalawang bata na isa naka-stilts, ang taas-taas, at yung babae merong parang coconut shell sa baba ng kanyang paa. Pala yung Philippine Readers ni Camilo Osillas. Hindi ko alam ang illustrator nun si Fernando Amorsolo at saka malay ko pa noon. Tapos, basta impressed ako kasi ang ganda-ganda ng games kahit na hindi ko sila alam dahil iba naman akong era. Ayun. Ingit na ingit ako. Sabi ko, bakit ganun ang kanilang libro? Ang ganda-ganda yung akin. Parang ganun. Tapos parang gustong-gusto ko nang makarelate sa ganun libro. I was hooked in Filipiniana. I was 8 years old.
Your two most anthologized stories are People in the War and A Wilderness of Sweets. And these are very powerful, very true-to-life stories. Did your family suffer much during the war?
Hardly. In fact, up to the end of the war, we were still eating rice, where everybody was eating mga kamote, na may mga ulalo, at saka yung rice mixed with kung ano-ano. We had evacuated to Malabon in my aunt's fish ponds, which were in Bulacan, and what happened was we were always eating bangus. Parang that was our suffering, puro bangus ang ulam. And then we missed the carnage that was Malate. But when everybody came back to Manila after the evacuation, nag-uwian na lahat. Tapos they were telling all kinds of stories about what they had experienced. So many sufferings and so many... And ang kaganda ng storya. Talagang mapapagulat ako. Ang ganda-ganda talaga ng mga storya. Tuloy na inggit ako. Sabi ko, buti pa sila ang kaganda ng storya niya. Ako wala. Ganon. So, I put myself in their shoes and began to tell their stories. In fact, yung sa People in the War, yung storya ng mga tao doon is the story of Ofelia Limcaco,
Okay.
who is the sister of Cheloy Dance. And the story of Wilderness of Sweets that came from a nurse na siguro mga 56 years old during the liberation. Her name was Mrs. Olympia Sonido. And kailangan kong ilipat siya sa isang gusto ko batang narrator. So I changed her to a 16-year-old narrator called Joy.
Since everyone has asked you this question, I might as well ask it as well. Why did you give up fiction?
Because I felt that it was so adolescent. I felt that it was my weeping wall. Parang masyadong emotional siya. Lahat ng sarili ko nilalagay ko doon. Nakakahiya, hindi ba? Parang ganun.
You were once telling me about your feelings about the academics, how they took your writing.
Ay,
Right?
or yung mga tiga-yupi na yan, yung mga yan. Okay. kasi, they were always telling us, kayo mga kolegyala kayo, ano ba namang alam ninyo about life? Alam lang ninyo yung mga, yan, hindi kayo marunong ng masa. Kasi ang mga storya nila, punong-puno ng mga mamang nakahubad, na nakapad very brown, dura ng dura, curse ng curse. Tapos yung mga babae, naku, labas na yung dede. Pagkatapos ng, nakihimutok yung breast. Yung marunong no. Sabi nila, wala kang karapatan sumulat. Okay. Tapos isang taon na, yung mga, sabi natin yung meron tayong year na akala natin mananalo tayo. Hindi tayo nanalo. May nanalong storya. Naku, tungkol sa barong-barong. Dun sa barong-barong nila, may toilet. Sa ilalim nun, may tubig, no? Sa ilalim ng toilet. Andar na gano'n, na estero. Isang araw may baboy na nag-float doon. Malaki yung tiyan ng baboy, dead na yung baboy. Hindi makadaan-daan sa ilalim ng toilet. So, eto na yung mga tao doon sa bahay. Naku, sinundot nila ng sinundot. Araw yan, binasa mo ilang pages yan, sundot. Sabi ko, ayoko yung ganun na storya kasi hindi ko yun alam. Paano ko magsusulat ng ganon? Yun.
So you went into article writing and painting, correct?
I went into article writing because I thought it's more real. Marami kang sasabi sa article writing, maybe you can influence people, and people read you. Fiction, pag may message isa, tatay mo pa yung ganon.
And you started painting at the ripe old age of 17.
Yes.
And how has it been?
I sell well.
So you make more money.
So,
Needed money.
siguro, sabi nila, siguro magaling sumulat yun. Kaya siguro, pwede natin bilhin. Okay. So,
Would you like to show us your paintings?
naku, I thought you'd never ask. Halika na, Christine. Pakita mo yan isa-isa.
Wow! Yan na.
Ayan.
Kita na like stories.
Ayan yung
Parang silang fiction din.
Ayan yung
Title.
Ano ba title niyan? Wars of the Universe.
Okay.
Kasi ayun yung sa itaas, ayun yung Christianity. Naglalaban yung angel at devil. Yung religions, yun yung Christianity, yun sa gitna. Ayun. No, that's Islam.
Okay.
And that's Buddhism in the rock bottom. And then there is the battle between the sun and the moon. And the moon is eating up. The moon is being eaten up by a dragon called the Bakunawa. This is the ethnic Filipino who is trying to keep his own in the, in a globalization, in a world of globalization. Tapos ito naman yung mga itik, nakikisali, baka merong original na makukuha kami sa Pilipinas. So of course, that's the eternal battle of the dog and the cat.
This is always how you sign your name. Hilda.
Oh,
You don't put your full name.
mahaba eh.
Or
Oh,
GCF.
tama na,
sorry,
Christine. Goodbye, thank you. Yung susunod naman na kabanata.
Ayan.
Yan. Gusto itaas din. Yan.
Title, Tita.
Ang
Hilda.
title niyan, Dragon Taming is an Art. Kasi, the dragon always in my painting stands for instinct. And here's this woman whose instinct is to go up there on a naked on a bike. That used to be me when I was a young housewife. Ayun, she tries to get the instinct away. And then this is the secret chamber. Everybody has that. The secret chamber of what your secrets, secret and very erotic dreams are. And of course, these guys under them are the ones who are telling you, don't do this, don't do that, and they're the ones who curb your instinct. Out your instinct! Okay, sunod na lang. Ito, ayan.
Nice.
Ito is called Flying Lessons. They're teaching this girl how to fly.
Okay.
And she's being taught by these 3 old women who are what you call the brujas. They're the wise women. And the mother is very nice.
Hindi mo kang masaya.
Ganyan ka ba?
Yeah.
Pagkatapos, yung kapatid nila, gusto rin matutong lumipad. It's naman metaphorical flying. Napaka old style naman itong gamit ito. In fact, she has one hand already in the thing, and the other hand she's trying out the waters. Ayun.
Is that mixed medium?
Watercolor lahat yan. Team, tama na. Ayaw na nila.
Meron pa.
Yan. Sige, walang katapusan yan.
Oo.
Ayan yan.
Mortals, Immortals, and Invisibles.
Yes. Ay, salamat natin yun.
Welcome.
Yun yung mga immortals sa itaas. Nandyan mga anghel. Nandyan din naman mga nagbe-meditate. Meron namang anghel na nasisingit lang doon. Meron pang devil na isang nasisingit. Yun. Pagkatapos, yung ganyan dyan sa gitna. Naku, aliw na aliw ko dyan. Ang pangalan yan, ito. Wall of Heaven. Nagsiseparate yan. Ito yung Earth. At tingnan mo naman kung sino ang Queen of Earth. Little Miss Philippines. Siyempre, corny mo eh. Tapos sa paligid naman lahat na nag-aalaga sa atin, all the nature spirits. Alam mo naman, very close ako sa mga, so ayan si Aswang, ayan si Fairy. Sino ba yung Fairy? Ito si
Bunso?
Hindi, si Capre.
Capre, sorry, kasi din ako kwento mo eh.
Sige. Ayun si mga tigbalang, half horse, tapos si Aswang. Tapos, ito yung Gwente. Kasi yung lahat yung mga nakahalikan, nilagay nga nila sa hell. Tapos,
Meron pa.
Meron pa. Kung puputulin ni Mana yan, puputulin niya. Eto. This is De La Cruz.
Heart by Babette.
Kasi
I did it in blue.
And Bluebeard.
Bluebeard.
Si Didit and Bluebeard. Yan, pinutulan niya yung ulo nung 10 asawa. Tinulungan ako ni Babette dyan, kaya ito, dalawa ko yung mga niya. Kaya nandyan din siya.
Yeah.
Naman ako,
Recognize.
credit. Okay, next. Ayan, favorite ko yan.
Maganda.
Kasi andyan yung bata sa itaasin yung anak. Na-conquer na niya yung kanyang dragon. Ayan, galaro niya. Pero yung nanay niya, hindi pa conquered yung dragon. Ayan, iniiyak ang pa niya. Kaya this painting is called River of Tears. Kasi natangisan niya pa lahat yung yung kailangan natapos na sa buhay niya. Ayan. Yung isa ng lover na nag-frustrate sa kanya, nilibing na nga niya. Hindi naman ako kung pinatay niya. Hindi naman siguro. Ayun.
Hindi na niya makalimutan.
Oo. Ngayon, ito ang pinakamahirap gawin dyan. Ito. Diyos mo, Joseph. Oh, kasi yan, drip method. Eh, naku, pag nag-drip method ka, di gaganon mo. So, Joseph, lahat ng pintura na pupunta sa akin, pajama. Ako, puro ng drip.
Dalawang drip.
Oh, siya. Yes.
Oh, and last.
Tama na yan.
Last, kasi ito yung maganda sa kanya. Maganda yan.
Oh. Yan. Yan ay, ano pangalan niyan? Rika, masahin mo nga.
Wala eh.
Ayun,
Gilda.
Hindi, ano yan? The tribute to the mermaids, the disappeared mermaids of the Pasig. Kasi nung araw, malinaw ang Pasig. Marami pa raw mermaid. Ngayon, wala na sila.
Ayun pala.
Yan sila. Tapos sabi ko, naku, bakit may anak doon? Wala naman lalaki. Nilagay ko lalaki. Eh, mukha naman pati. Yan.
Why do you like to paint?
Kasi hindi siya nakakapagod. You use your right brain instead of your left brain. Hindi puro gray matter. Hindi puro reasoning. Kailangan lahat rational. But sa right brain, you bank on inspiration and instinct. Yun.
And you can call, right?
Yes.
That's what you do when you paint, right? You call on your departed friends.
I call on my departed friends. Like, si Oni Bolmedo, syempre. Tsaka kung minsan si Manansala, kasi magaling siya. Si H.R. Ocampo, dahil kilala ko yun. Si Ang Cook. Ayun. Tapos,
You like music din, right? So do you also call?
Yun. Pagka ako stuck, di syempre, hihingi ako ng lalabay. Syempre, from the best.
Of course.
Si Beethoven. Di bibigyan ako ng lalabay. Di matututo na ako. Pero pag talagang stuck na ako, tatawag ako ng mga living friends.
For those, for example?
Di yung matitigas ang ulo.
Name names.
Gaya ni Danny Delena. Ayan, sabi niya, ay nako, ikaw Hilda, huwag ka nang kukuha ng art. Masisira ka. Pagkatapos, kung meron kang kapirasong ma-drop na dumi sa yung painting, huwag mo siyang buburahin, mabubutas lang yung papel mo, kakabura mo. Ang gawin mo, kung meron kang pinipaint na animal, isama mo yun, naging pulgas ng aso. O kung lumilipad naman siya, ano ba siya, angel o langaw, kung anong gusto mo.
Kasi kinakwento mo before yung natutunan mo kay Onim. Remember? Yung life lesson niya na pag nag-drawing ka.
Oo, diyan ba yan?
Oo, yun yun. Kwento mo sa akin yun dati.
Si Onip, tinatawag ko, yun halos parang hinahawakan na niya yung kamay ko. Tinutulungan niya akong mag-paint. Tapos kasi, si Onip nung araw, kahit lumalagpas sa page, sige pa rin, tuloy-tuloy. Sabi ko, Onip, dyan na yan, oh. Meron na yung guhit dyan. Wala siya, sige pa rin, ganyan. Ay, siguro natutunan ko, no rules. Parang yun ang kaya ko, alam ko yun. Kaya pag ako nagpe-paint, wala akong iniisip na saan ba ako magsisimula, dito ba o dyan ba. Alam ko yung general trend saan ako pupunta. Pero hindi ko alam na itong lagay mo rito, ito lagay mo rito. Malay ko nun. Sige lang, sundan mo yung kamay mo, sundan mo yung kamay mo. Mamaya pag nabuo siya, ganyan talaga ang gusto ko. So, yun.
So you would say you have a hard time learning when there are rules?
Zero.
Masirap ka?
Wala talaga. Ang pag-asa.
So, how are you able to finish your master's thesis?
Kasi...
Di kwento yun.
kasi... Nung araw, lahat ng thesis, kailangan meron kang pinipiling
Canonical writer.
yeah, somebody that is a foreign writer, and then there are many things written about him or her, and then you copy all of this down. Yan ang ginagawa nung araw, ginugupit mo yan, pinapaste mo, tapos meron ka ng thesis. Taas ng grades nun. Hindi ako marunong nun paano? Kahit naman, sa dancing, wala rin naman ako alam pag,
Freestyle ka.
panay freestyle. Panay freestyle, pero makako-choreograph ako. Yun.
So how did you solve the thesis? Kasi nakagraduate ka in
Ayun,
1968.
kasi, marunong ako sumulat ng story.
Yes.
So sabi ko, yun lang na maalam ko Baka pwedeng ipakita yan sa Ateneo. So I did. And I had 13 stories to put together. I think they were kind of either inattentive or kind at the time. So
or they recognized your brilliance.
No. So they allowed
them.
it. And it was the first thesis on creative writing that came out in Ateneo.
And precisely by breaking the rule, you were able to create a new rule. Because now that's acceptable. Creative writing, yes, as a thesis. Is this also why you don't like to teach?
Because
The rules thing?
it's more than that.
What?
Because
You'd make a great teacher.
no,
Because
I wouldn't know how to teach anyone how to be free. It's not something you teach. It's something you have to learn by yourself.
what was the rationale behind putting up GCF books? Tell us naman, Hilda, about your coffee table books. What was it that you really wanted to achieve with these books? You do know that your publishing these books became a cultural landmark?
GCF Books was filling a need of the early 50s, which still prevailed in the 70s. Filipino authored books were badly designed and often boring, with faded and inappropriate illustrations, and printed on paper so thin you could read the print even when you turned the page. So they were naturally shoved into the farthest corners of the bookstores and the most bottom shelves, and no one bought them. Nobody cared for Filipiniana.
But you had no background in making books, so how did you learn how to do books?
Meron I had just finished working with Alfredo Roses on the 10-volume Filipino Heritage series, and I realized how beautiful Filipino books could be, and how easy to do. I wanted to make a book on a Filipino subject, informative but not too intellectual. It had to have beautiful pictures and paintings. The paper must be first class with a hardcover. I wanted to produce a book so beautiful. You wanted to hug it and kiss it, kasi mabango, and cradle it into your arms like a baby.
So what was your first volume?
Di syempre food. Before that, Filipino food was not considered worthy of a book. Yon, puro recipe book. Tapos, ang gusto ko is ang food book to show why Filipinos eat the way we do. What kind of food they eat and why.
And that was the culinary culture of the Philippines. The first GCF book that was awarded one of the 10 best food books in the 1977 International Book Fair in Frankfurt, Germany, didn't it?
Yep.
What about this one?
Turn of the century. Because of its design, it made such an impact on the Manila scene. Yan ang Art Nouveau team. Nung sabi ko kay designer na ni Crisio, gusto ko ng Art Nouveau theme, sabi niya, ano ba yun? Hindi niya alam kung ano. I had to Xerox old Spanish magazines of the turn of the century to show him. Pero ganun siya kagaling. Dinisign niya each page using only Filipino motifs. motifs, but he never copied anything from what I showed him. And for years or more, his designs were being duplicated in magazines and newspapers and books. Or these were always inspired by Nick's designs. Kind of trendsetter yung Nick Ricio, no?
Which was your bestseller?
By far, ancestral houses and folk architecture. They are always used in architectural schools because the ancestral houses had a lot on the Bahay na Bato and the other on tribal dwellings. They were very basic information. Folk architecture, they're all about houses of the minorities. Mga bahay kubo, gawa ni Encarnacion, ni Father Bobby.
What's this book? Being Filipino?
Minsan, gusto namin maglokohan. This is Nick's 69 book. You read the text there. Tingnan mo. Then you turn it around and look at the pictures from there. 69, di ba?
These were costly to produce. Did you have any problems with price?
Definitely. A Filipino book in the 70s cost about $12.50. Our first books were $140 to $220. Some said, why do you make books for the rich? Books should be affordable by everyone. Pero sabi ko, isn't that the responsibility of the states? Bakit ako? If you want a Mercedes-Benz, how can I make it for the cost of a jeepney? But afterwards, the same critics would lay away books with my distributor and pay for them on installment.
I noticed that the books you wrote yourself are mostly published by other companies and not GCF books. Why naman?
Well, I have low self-esteem. When it's my book, I always think no one will buy it. Ayokong malugi. So most of them are with Karina Bolasco. So I'm not a GCF books writer. I'm an anvil author.
Hilda, you once spoke about the beauty of collaboration, which seems counterintuitive to the Filipino spirit, the idea of working together, what with crab mentality and all. And yet it seems to work really well for you, particularly, especially with your theater productions. Share naman your trade secrets. How were you able to make all these different artists work together really well?
Nako, simple yan.
Okay, go.
We always, in GCF books, we always began with lunch. Kasi naman, you always
Smart.
have to eat lunch, hindi ba? So I thought it was the best way to get everybody here on time. And also, there's something about breaking bread that bonds people. And so the contributing writers and the contributing illustrators and the editor who was also not a permanent editor,
Yes.
and everybody else could really work. They know each other very well and work together quite well. We met once a week, and we really did a lot of work. And more than anything, it was a lot of fun.
Show us a book with the most collaboration.
Siguro yung History of the Burgess. Si Mariel Francisco wrote the Straight Historical Report. Si Ferriola na Kengkoy wrote all the sidebars with anti-colonial comments pertaining to each period. Tapos yung si Odette Alcantara na mas Kengkoy pa at si Oni Polvedo na super Kengkoy spiced up the comments and made them very funny. Nick Ricio did the illustrations, but we also invited Jess Abrera and Onib to do cartoons. That made the book crazier. And everybody loved the book.
Hilda, what about naman those huge theater pieces?
Hindi ganun din. My only skill, whether in bookmaking or theater, is being able to recognize talent, even in people not known to me, because I follow their works and remember what I like about them. I know exactly what part of bookmaking or theater production they will fit in. Sometimes they are complete strangers, like Rodi Vera, our scriptwriter for Luna and Aswang Romance. He was a consistent prize winner in the Palanca Awards, and I saw one of his plays. So tinawagan ko siya, sabi ko, sumubang gumawa ng script para sa amin. He immediately agreed to work with me. Ayun, tuloy, nanalo ng first prize yung Luna namin. Dati yan si Rudy, walang interest sa aswang. But now he's in love with the creature and you find it in many of his subsequent plays. Si Nick Ricio, designer of many GCF books, I followed his layouts in Goodman, which was the magazine of a car company. And I got a friend to deliver Nick to my doorstep. O eto, sabi
Eto
niya,
na.
yan na, kakilala siya ni Mailing Sikam. Si Manny Chavez came after him. He is multi-talented, can do layout for books, build a stage, choose the music, and design costumes. Medyo cranky, pero okay lang. We still collaborate a lot, like you have to thank him or curse him for directing this video.
Tell us about the fashion show that was more than a fashion show in CCP.
Oh yes, my first theater production, Jamming on an Old Saya, directed by Nonon Padilla, who is the resident director of CCP at the time, and Wanda Luwadin, who is a fashion director. I like the embroidery work on old sayas. One day I cut out the sleeves of one and collaged them to the sleeve of another, and got parts of still another, and so forth and so on. And then I made myself a blouse. Naku, parang sandwich board siya, dalawang squares. But everybody loved it. So, na-encourage ako. I collaged more and more pieces until I had about 80 or more small and very large collages. I asked a couturier, Steve De Leon, and later other couturiers to make wearables out of them, until it became many dresses and gowns and sayas, and ended up a fashion show. Yan si Ann Weiser, Amerikana na nakatira dito sa Pilipinas, came in to do unique hats and headdresses. Isa yung galeon, isa yung calaw bird, all made out of antique saya materials. So it didn't end up a fashion show, but a real theater piece in CCP, with dramatic props and lots of original things like the bicycles and windsocks and a pot of candies and somebody's hair being cut and a male model painted gold that don't belong at all to a fashion show.
And for the costume extravaganza Luna and Aswang Romance?
It had a merry mix of actors from the movies, repertory, Philippines, UP Rep, Tanghalang Filipino, even a writer. Kasi parang ang idea ko, halu-haluin mo sila. Kasi hindi nagtatrabaho yan magkakasama, tingnan nga natin. Gaya nila Joy Virata, si Chinchin Gutierrez, si Floyd Quintos, Dexter Santos, Alia Honasan, marami pa, huwag mo na akong tanungin. And the dress designers, kaya sila Rahul Laurel, Steve De Leon, si Ben Farales, even the late Joe Salazar, buhay pa siya noon, si Patis Tesoro. Impressed na ba kayo? Nobody ever said no to a collaboration with us.
So first you were a short story writer, and then you shifted to article writing, correct? And then you went to publishing, and then you went to theater production, and then now naman you're into painting. Wouldn't that describe you as a dilettante?
Sus naman. My God, you know what a dilettante is? It's someone who flits from interest to interest and hardly gets their feet wet. Yun ang tinatawag na saw-saw patis. Me, I think I dive very deeply into everything I do. I study all about it. I even put my money, okay, my husband's money into it. And then I work very hard at it. And yes, I put my money where my mouth is, and everybody gets paid. So, yung ba tinatawag na dilitan? I don't think any one of the things I've been attracted to is my lifetime calling. For instance, I have no ambition to be a book magnate like Mrs. Socorro Ramos or to fund theater productions for life like Repertory Philippines. Hirap yata noon. I think I just like to do things that have not yet been done, in the Philippines anyway, to be the first stepping stone. Mariel Francisco, who's my friend, calls me a door opener, also known as trailblazer. I become the one-woman bomb disposal unit so that it's not so difficult to go through the same path again. Most of the things I did were firsts. So maybe that's my calling. Door opener. I like that. At 11 o'clock, the Japs had begun to set fire to the houses on Taft Avenue, and we could hear the sucking, snapping sound of the Holocaust through the barred window of our garage. Pieces of walls and roof floated eerily in the air like scraps of paper in the orange-red, heat-drenched sky. Papa thought it best to move to the church, and we helped my brothers pile our belongings on a wooden pushcart which we rolled out into the street. Outside, a girl lay dead face down in the canal, her buttocks and her legs sticking up. People were all about, trundling pushcarts, hushing children, seeking cover in panic behind some crumbled wall, whenever the plane staged a dogfight directly overhead. Smoke hung thickly upon the air so that you could look right into the sun. Out of the fog stepped a dazed Esme, her dress torn, blood dripping down her legs. "Are you hurt, Esme?" Mother cried. She shook her legs and balled her skirt in embarrassment between her legs. "Where is your family?" my father asked. "I don't know," said Esme bewilderedly. "I don't know. I'm looking for them." And before father could her, she had run away. In the churchyard, we came upon Mrs. Mercado holding her husband to her breast. A shrapnel had plowed through his temple and uncupped his skull, exposing the throbby, oystery mass of his brain. "What shall I do?" Mrs. Mercado asked hysterically. "What shall I do?" She rocked him in her arms, and his eyelids flickered in sorrow, and she bent down and sucked the breath out of his fevered mouth. Mother fetched a clean towel from the pushcart and told Bobby to wet it, and I looked away as Mother wrapped it around Mr. Mercado's brain. And Papa went to search for some brandy, some gin, anything to dull the pain. We wet our own handkerchiefs in the fountain of the churchyard and placed them over our nose, and the interior of the church was filled with smoke. And we made our way to a side altar thick with marble slabs proclaiming in gilt letters a wish of peace for the dead. Our neighbor, Mr. Ilustre, came in through a side door in high spirits, For a relative had told him that Santo Tomas had been liberated and that the Americans were building a pontoon to take the place of Santa Cruz Bridge. Mr. Ilustre would not come inside the church, but sat by the door with the bullets whizzing past his ears and folding his arms over his chest. He had inverted a flat wash basin with corrugated edges over his head like a comic helmet, and whenever he wanted to say something, he had to turn his head very slowly so as not to tilt the wash tub off balance. But after a while, Mr. Ilustre pitched forward, and we didn't have to examine him to know that he was dead. The parish priest walked down the aisle, carrying the ciborium, a golden-rayed sun upon his breast. "You can't stay here," the priest told the families grouped on the pews. "The church is choked to the belfry with dynamite." The wind had changed direction, and the fire was moving away, and we decided to go back to our house. We found the back part of the house collapsed, and the sooty chimneys in squashed masses among the frames of windows and doors. Our bird cage lay among the wreckage, and Peace the bird was lying on its floor in a mass of bloody flumes. We crawled into the garage and cooked a meal of gruel, building a small fire with the wood of a broken chair. By 3 o'clock, the Japs had become desperate and were killing every male in sight. We hid Papa and Pabi under some pillows and bedclothes and sat on them till they complained that our weight would kill them faster than the Japs. Leo was nowhere in sight, gone on some foolish errand of mercy, with a bottle of disinfectant and a swab of gauze. Through a gap in the door, we could see the street strewn with corpses like so many dolls. A Jap stalked by with a fixed bayonet, and his foot tripped on a mattress rolled against the fence. With both hands, the Jap lifted the mattress and found an old man underneath. Tomodachi, the man babbled, going down on his knees to hug the Jap's legs, and the Jap lifted his bayonet and buried it into the man's neck. Soon after, several women whom the slaughtering had turned into jabbering idiots burst through the door of the garage. They were wild-eyed and barefoot and restlessly paced the garage. "They've killed every one of our husbands," Mrs. Rosal, who was among them, said. "We're looking for some cloth to make a flag." "If we make a Japanese flag," another woman said, "do you think they will have mercy on us?" "Look," a fat woman said, coming up with a red tablecloth from a laundry bag. "It's just what we need." She inverted the plate on it and drew a circle which she cut out with scissors from my mother's bag. The other woman helped her pin the red circle on one of the baby diapers, and they tied it to the end of a ceiling broom. Up and down the streets they marched in a crazy parade, waving the flag over their heads and singing a Japanese song, and other women poured out of the neighboring houses to sing and join the parade. At the corner, they encountered a squad of Japs who machine-gunned every single woman in the group. Then someone outside screamed, "Mrs. Sonido, your son Leo's been hit." "Where? Where is he?" my mother cried, getting up suddenly, dropping the scissors and the tablecloth, and a finger pointed, "There, over there." And we ran, and my father ran, the whirring of the shells over us, and a grenade rocked the ground as we fell flat on it, feeling it trembling under us, and the people screaming, and the houses in smoke, and the Japs gone berserk. My father found my brother Leo face down near the canals. A man lay cowering under the still warm body of my brother, using him for cover, his thin legs shaking like a fearful ague, and my father pulled my brother's body harshly away from the man. My brother lay on the earth, staring up at the petrified trees with eyes of glass. There was a bullet hole in his cheek, and my father felt the back of Leo's head where the bullet had plowed through, and it was matted with blood. The smoke hung upon the sky like an awful fog, and the noonday sun was a dim orange ball far away in the kingdom of God. The bombs rained silently upon the burning world, and I sat upon my haunches and watched my father grow wild with a terrible grief. There was no sun and there was no wind, and my mother went about putting things aright, as she always did in our house, setting up chairs and picking up after us children and putting the kettle to boil. After a while, I heard her exclaim softly, "Oh, he's so dirty. Let's clean him up." And they lifted my brother to the shelter we had made, and my mother cleaned him up and bandaged neatly the hole in his cheek, and we covered him with a blanket and some clothes. My father sat immobile, his back towards us, refusing to accept the death of his favorite son. The earth was a wilderness of slaughter. Gaunt dogs detached a human arm here, a leg there, and where could you begin to dig when you couldn't find a spade and didn't know where your yard ended and the next began? And although we watched day and night, our tears and our love could not preserve my brother, and after a day and a half, my mother decided that we should burn the body, and we all knew she was right. Bobby and I helped her lift my brother and carried him to what seemed to be our yard, under the shade of some banana plants, and we laid him gently upon the sod. My mother pulled one of the mattresses over him and soaked it with kerosene and lit it, and it began to burn with a steady yellow flame. My mother sat on a stone watching the body burn, and my father sat away from her in the shelter, staring at the cage where peace had died. That night the Japs strafed our shelter from their secret hiding places among the rubble and the barbed wire and the burrows in the ground. And a bearded stranger with guns tucked in his belt and bullets in a grisly row over his chest came stamping into our shelter right into the midst of us. And he said, "They're here. They've liberated PGH. You don't believe me?" And he overturned his jacket. "Look at my treasures. Look at all that chili con carne and spam." And forthwith he peeled a tin and, laughing, proffered the minced red meat to us. "Where is Leo?" said the stranger, looking from one to the other of us, holding out his feast of meat. "Where is Leo?" And Bobby said, "Oh, Badal, he's gone, he's gone." My mother always said, "My joy, be brave." My brother had been dead 2 days, but fresh bodies are difficult to burn. And I went out in the early mist of morning to look at my brother who had died. I touched the blackened mattress over him, and it puffed up and disintegrated under my touch. Half of the body had already gone, and a heavy sweetish odor came from the remaining flesh. A gaunt dog came sniffing at the bare white foot that had come untangled, and I rained upon it clods of mud. My brother was dead, and I could see my mother coming into the yard with another can of kerosene and matches. She was in an old dress whose prints had washed out, and she hadn't changed much, except for an aching in the joints and a flutter in the heart, and her hair that had become the tired white of wood you find washed up on the shore in the sand. She poured the kerosene upon the corpse, crying silently, laving it like precious oils upon the poor disappeared parts. My father had not uttered a word since Leo died. An American tank rumbled by, and I had never seen one, so I walked to the gate to watch. The gate had fallen on its huge hinge and hung like a torn wing. On the littered street lumbered a large, muddy gray-green tank with stars on its body, and several pretty girls with lace around their necks were sitting on its top with some GIs. A guerrillero in a ragged hat was walking behind it, holding up the bloody head of a Jap. People were dancing on the streets, hugging one another, with tears in their eyes, and whenever they yelled, "Victory Joe," the GIs threw showers of candy and gum. One of the chewing gums in a red, white, and blue wrapper landed on the crossbar of our gate. I picked it up and kept it in my pocket because my brother was dead. My brother was dead, and I couldn't find a flower, but I could save him a piece of gum.